Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to Fanalysis, Pixar. Today we're going to be covering Toy Story, and Matt's going to explain why we're doing this first and what's soon to follow.
hmm So from your perspective, guys, you may or may not have seen a couple other reviews of Pixar films up to this point. We're like hilariously disorganized here at Fanalysis, as you well know. So just to explain and recap, like what it is that we're doing here. This summer, Incredibles 2 came out. And from your perspective, we may have already talked about that, but that made that made 20 Pixar films since the studio's first film, Toy Story, which we're covering today, which was released in 1995, I think, like 23 years ago. Wow, that's crazy. But yeah, so 20 films, and we thought we would do like we would rank all 20 like from worst to best in our opinions. But before we do that, we came to the conclusion that there are 10 particular films that we thought were more worthy of specific discussion, that we're going to give really detailed, in-depth reviews the same way that we do our Harry Potter and Avatar: The Last Airbender discussions and so forth. So yeah, that's what this is. This is the next step in that. We're doing Toy Story, and we have an additional 9 other films that will be discussed before the top 20 sometime later this year. So yeah, that's that, and let's get into it. Let's get into Toy Story, the original.
Sure, the first of the Pixar films, opening up with a nice little montage of Andy and his appreciation of his toys. I particularly love this sequence because it's a really good introduction to the film and the tone and the characters and everything all at once for what we're about to see as a whole. But also it immediately captures kind of the themes of the story as well, with us being able to relate to the fact that this is a kid enjoying his toys before any of the actual Toy Story stuff begins. It's just a frame of what his perspective is, what Andy's perspective is, and what we have ourselves for just general familiarity with playing with toys.
Yeah, like this is like I guess, what do you call this step in the story? This is before like they have like what do you call it, an inciting incident. Like this is just like this is the original status quo before something comes in to change that drastically. And Andy, I will say this, he's like sort of a he's like I was gonna call him an everyman, but he's not a man. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like anybody, when we were kids, like things like Little Mermaid, Aladdin, like one of those was like the girls' Disney movie, and the other one was like the guys' Disney movie. And as you become an adult, it doesn't matter. You can like whatever you want. But at the time, there's like that stigma. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
But the way that Andy's presented, though, is like his relationship with his toys, and even some of the toys he has, like Bo Peep. You know what I mean? They sort of, and Mr. Potato Head, who's like a toddler's toy, as far as I'm concerned. Even though he objects to that in this film, but he's sort of like any kid can relate to this. You know what I mean? And I think it's the animators didn't have to try too hard, or the writers, whatever, didn't have to try too hard to express this, whether by just remembering from like their own memory banks how they were as kids, or by observing their own. That's sort of like every kid can relate to this. So it's great.
The relatability throughout the film of the perspective of Andy as a kid and enjoying his toys, the characters of the toys themselves, everything that plays off in the film, the kind of message it's trying to send in each scene and thematic sequence, is just tied to how relatable it is. How human it is.
Yeah.
Even though these are obviously inanimate objects, they are people. They're very powerfully animated in both the visuals and Woody's expressions we often talk about as for example. But just what they're feeling, everything about it is just a complete relatable package for not just the kids but also the adults. We'll mention it a bit later when it becomes more relevant, but humor, for example, is very, very powerful in this film.
Yeah. And it's surprising to me, like when I go back and look at it, how it's not just Tim Allen as Buzz Lightyear or Tom Hanks as Woody. Most notable characters are voiced by somebody who's known. Like of course, probably the biggest one is Don Rickles with voicing Mr. Potato Head. Like he's like arguably the most famous insult comic ever. Like even though he just passed away, but very accomplished, very well known. But normally. Not a child star, you know what I mean? Or like not one that you would put in child's media at all. But it just works somehow. Even Andy's mom, she's played by Laurie Metcalf, I think is her name, who was on Roseanne. I don't know if you know what Roseanne
I
is.
do not.
It's okay. It is a famous sitcom over here, or still kind of is until she got like political with her tweets and got booted off her reincarnated show recently. That was big news here. It was all Trump centric, as everything is these days. But getting back on topic. So yeah, so Andy's birthday and the toys are scared of being replaced. That's basically, it's like a yearly thing. I like how they how naturally you get the feeling that they go through this every year, without them saying that.
They very quickly establish that this is kind of routine, even though it's the inciting event of the story, or the introduction of it at any rate. This is something they've been through before. It's establishing the kind of leadership position of Woody, establishing each of the characters with their little introductions and their personalities, all of the people that voice them being perfect for their characters, even if they are well known. It's a good example of a film that doesn't get overshadowed by its celebrity status involved.
Yeah, and they wouldn't, because none of these people are kids or people that kids would know.
Of
it's
course,
like I didn't know.
Yeah, for that alone, the fact that this is a kids film. But even for the adults who saw it at the first, when it first came out, before it was Toy Story, this big thing, and it was just being established, in terms of pop culture. I think they could have easily kind of fallen into it and not just heard these characters. But again, going back to the expressions, the actual animation of the faces and the movements of the characters, it's really good at drawing you in and making you forget that this is actually, which for the first film, this is the first Pixar film. The animation is brilliant at that.
It really is. As far as the toys go, it hasn't aged very much at all. Like in those 23 years, like the human characters, Andy in particular, like him and his sister, like they do look rather doll-like, ironically enough, especially in comparison to not just like the latest films with like things like Incredibles 2 and Coco or whatever, which are just much more advanced as far as the technology goes, but even Toy Story 3, which at this point is like, what is that, like 8 or 9 years old? I can't remember what year that came out. Which I didn't see when it first came out. We'll get into that. But yeah, I mean, that movie, if you look at Andy in that and compare it to what he looks like here, he looks far less human somehow. But it's okay. Like, I mean, this movie is 23 years old.
It's aged extremely well, even despite the weaknesses. Like early on in the film, I noticed, for example, some slight clipping with Woody's hand on the bed sheets as he's sitting on. Very, very minor things like that come up. The kind of interaction between the character models and the environment around them is the biggest distinction. That and the actual textures and visuals of them. There's a notable difference in quality, but these are very minor criticisms for something that came out as long ago as it did. It's not like this is like, this is clearly the first one. You could easily have a small child watch this and then not know it was at least for the earlier films, not know which order they came out in.
That's true. I agree with that. Like for the most part, I agree with that.
Obviously, later into stuff like Coco and Good Dinosaur, of animation wise, it leagues ahead. But
see, and that's the funny thing about Good Dinosaur is like the backgrounds are stunning.
Oh yeah.
The actual characters are like the most cartoony they've ever had. But we'll get to that one when we get to that one.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can tell from my tone, but that's not my favorite Pixar movie. But anyway,
the simple stuff like the soldiers getting sent out into the house to kind of get the intel for the toys back upstairs. They play into the comedy and the reality of the toys. The simple things like the legs being stuck together, so they have to kind of march awkwardly with the plastic mold. It just, every little detail like that, the drawing on the mechanics and the nature of the toys involved. They nail the kind of animation and movement and the comedy they can pull from that all throughout the film.
Right. And that idea that like when you step on a toy and it hurts, but like, hey, it hurt the toy too.
Yeah, man, no.
Right. Yeah, it's just it's so good. But I guess the other thing that bears mentioning is the reason why we see Woody in leadership mode here isn't so much because of the birthday party, which I mean it is, but in part. But really, what's going on here is Andy's about to move as well. So that's another like. I like how they're setting the stage for like the story before. It's just very well done, because what the story really is about is how like Woody and Buzz get lost, from their owner, and the what's that the clock the what's that called, the ticking clock element of the story is because Andy's about to move, so they have to get back home now, otherwise they're gone forever. And it's nice how they're sprinkling that stuff in here, in a subtle fashion.
Yeah, it's
you know,
not glaring as like we're moving tomorrow, like signs coming up, and
right.
everything. It's all just background material and focusing on the moment of what's happening here today. The focus is the party and the introduction of Buzz, and everything else is background until it needs to be. Coming closer into the foreground. It's very well done in that one, in that regard. But
Yes.
also the fact that Woody's in leadership position, not because he is the leader, although that is of course the main reason, but also because we're getting an introduction into how he's feeling about the situation. He's kind of allaying the other toys' fears, saying no, nobody's getting replaced. Really, he's just saying I'm not getting replaced. Internally he's feeling that, at least internally he's feeling very, very just as scared as they are, but he's burying it in the back of his mind and trying to do something about it.
Yeah, he's still feeling fear, but he has like less reason to be afraid because he has been Andy's favorite for so long. Like we get the clear impression that, I mean, we just look at like the decor of Andy's room and like the whole montage with the famous song, you got a friend in me. Like Woody is the favorite.
And which
at
leads
least now.
at least for the moment, leading into the inciting incident, of course, where Buzz appears, knocking him straight off the bed onto the ground, and this is him entering in that new world. For Woody and the great hero's journey story. Buzz has now taken his prize space on the bed.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought that this moment would have been like the meeting of like two like cinematic icons? There's no one in the world doesn't know who Woody and Buzz Lightyear are. They're two, and for something that is only 23 years old, to be as identifiable or recognizable as things like Daffy Duck or Bugs Bunny, you know what I mean? To get that status that quickly is much more quickly than that, because even in the 90s they were just everywhere.
I mean, it says a lot for the immediacy of the Pixar powerhouse. It wasn't like it built up gradually over a time. The first Pixar film built the ethos surrounding it, and it's delivered almost every single time since. Certainly well, if not as well as it always has done. So it all starting with this moment of Woody looking up from the bed, looking up and just
hello. yeah, it's like there's no sign of intelligent life anywhere.
It's brilliant.
Like he comes and this is also to me like I hadn't seen this movie in many years before we revisited it to talk about this. It was one that I rewatched many times as a kid, but it had been at least 10, maybe 12 years since I had actually sat down and watched this movie before we got into it. And I forgot how funny this is. It's. I think that there's some movies you grow out of and other ones that you grow into, and this is like the latter for me.
Toy Story is arguably the example of that, because it's got so many layers. You can watch it as a child and find it funny from the basic comedy that's underlying it throughout. But then you watch it as a teen and you're starting to get more of the jokes and more of the euphemisms, if nothing else, starting to bleed through for you. And then you watch it as an adult and it's still bringing more to the table that you've missed the nuance of previously. It's a layered film in terms of the comedy, and the most impactful thing for me is the pacing of it. There are films that do this as well as Toy Story, in terms of the layered euphemisms and appreciation of the different tones you can reach. But I've never seen a film. I didn't even realize this until going back and analyzing it here these last few days. I've never seen a film pace their comedy out as well as Toy Story does. Every other instance that you see on screen is something that's going to make you laugh, and not just like but an actual like proper laugh.
Yeah,
consistently, without damaging the tone of the actual drama or anything.
Right, and so much of it is like it's built around like just how much Woody can't believe that Buzz is serious. It's just that incredulity and not understanding really where Buzz is coming from, like at all, which is even though Woody's being sort of rude about it because he's being replaced and he's not happy about that, and Buzz is seemingly just annoying. It's like when he comes to the realization that this guy is like actually delusional, and it still has no sympathy for him.
Yeah, but at the same time he kind of starts to see the humor in it. He's like, wait, what? Buzz like an alien? Where? He's just laughing his ass off.
It's like I love the moment where he says something like listen, spaceman, and he goes like, I think the word you're looking for is space ranger. The word I'm looking for I can't say because there are preschool toys around. I mean, it's like things like that. I don't remember these conversations. It's been so long since I saw this movie rather, but I mean, it's just so hilariously funny.
And
I
it's
don't know if we want to get
non-stop
to the
as well. It's just it's
yeah.
not like this is the funny part of the film or anything. Obviously there are dips when it goes into the more dramatic side, but even during and between those sections, there is a heavy amount of comedy applied, and it doesn't break anything. It's not like you're getting bathos at any point or something's being played just for laughs. It all just is perfectly positioned between each dramatic moment, and it flows really nicely.
It's a combination of just perfect or as close to perfect as the time would allow animation and timing with the way that the jokes are written and the way the lines are delivered, but also the sound design. The moment when Woody's had enough and he undoes Buzz's faceplate and he starts he
and
goes
Woody's
like this
expression as well. Yeah.
His expression is hilarious, but he goes like this, and the
wrist movement,
his wrist rattles, and the sound of the rattling is what makes that. It takes it over the top to hilarious from just plain funny. That desperate rattling is hilarious. I love it, and that sound design that all comes down to just Pixar is lots of little things done perfectly. You know what I mean? That's what really they are
throughout.
Yeah.
And they very rarely drop the ball on that one, even in the films that aren't quite as cohesive wholes. The little details are there that let you appreciate the overall quality.
Right.
But yeah, the introduction of Buzz happens, and we get a lot of this is a good place to talk about the animation actually, because while we talked about the expressions and how it delivers on the emotional side, the actual just quality of the animation itself, the reflections on Buzz Lightyear's visor and the way he moves around the room when he's jumping and doing his falling with style stuff. It's very fluid. It's very it's not unique, of course, but the fact that this was the first one and the fact that it accomplished as much as it did and blew people's minds even on day one for the film, it can't really be undersold. In terms of its overall impact.
It's very experimental, the whole process that they went through to make this. It's this is a studio that will literally design new technology to make something work. To this day, they're still doing that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just they're definitely pushing the boundaries or the envelope in all of their good films.
Yes.
Actually, I'll put it that way. Which we're not going to reveal which ones we don't like in this video, but there's a few. We're not saying that Pixar is perfect, guys, but the ones that are good are borderline really perfect. Good. Yeah.
I mean, this film in particular just doesn't seem to have many flaws. We have one that we'll bring up in a bit.
Yeah, we have one. Do we?
This is the perfect time. We've marked it on the frame for this. So yeah, good timing.
Yeah, go ahead. The one thing that we don't quite get, and Callum's the one that first voiced it, so I'll let him share it. But I totally agree with him.
It's not like this a film-breaking criticism. It's a little bit more than a nitpick based on the way the story is presented. But the main issue we could find, really looking through and picking apart everything, was the fact that Buzz shouldn't really need to freeze or feel the need to freeze without.
Yeah, he freezes whenever humans show up, the way that all the other toys do, even though he's not aware of the fact he's a toy.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we can think in the back of our heads that the rules of the universe are that they physically need to. It's kind of an instinct thing. Whatever. The film doesn't need to explain that to us. It would be detrimental if it did. But at the same time, it is odd. There are many moments where you think, why is Buzz just freezing here right now? It's a strange thing.
It appears to be an inconsistency, especially because of the fact that later on in the film, as we'll mention later, Woody reveals to a certain human that they are alive and can move and can
so it's
unfreeze.
not necessarily 100% forced. So even that doesn't really work. So it's a little bit of an inconsistency. Nothing worth noting beyond the fact that you need to note some flaw. But when we said something that's the only thing we could find though.
Yeah, that's literally the only thing. Yeah, that's the one nitpick that we agreed on. Well, yeah, that probably doesn't make sense. And I think that the one thing that might have saved it, sorta, is which again, not a big deal. But if they wanted to maybe explain it away, Buzz could have said something like, "Star Command, the locals freeze. It must be some kind of different." When the giants of this planet come. He might have just been doing monkey see, monkey do, or when in Rome sort of in his mind. That might have explained it. But he never says something like that. So it is just he freezes without explanation.
Yeah, that's a good example of a fix for that, actually. Yeah. But yeah, not a big deal. It's just worth noting, really.
This movie is otherwise perfect. And it totally holds up.
A lot of Pixar have that, actually, near perfect designs. But this is one notable for the fact that it's achieving it in the first, straight out the door instance. But yeah, we get obviously as we spoke about before, the moment where Woody realizes that Buzz is legitimately nuts, and a lot of it's one of the more comedy-centric scenes in the film. With the whole following on from the transition of Woody getting more and more exasperated with the the way all of the other toys are gravitating to him as a kind of new leadership position. Obviously, Andy it's his favourite new toy now because he's excited about it. Musical transitions is kind of have come up 2 points by this point in the film, which are very good. The soundtrack isn't with Toy Story. It's not one of those unique kind of you hear it and immediately and think this is a specific type of genre music, but at the same time, you couldn't go, oh, that's what that is. But at the same time, when you hear it throughout the film, you go, well, this is just pure Toy Story. It doesn't fit anything else, which is impressive given the fact that it's not particularly unique in style.
Well, it's very, what's the word? Atmospheric, I suppose, or ambient, like the soundtrack. It's not very in your face, aside from a very few select moments. But it perfectly suits the moment. But the actual, that's sort of like the score, I guess. The soundtrack would be like
similar
the song.
in vein to kind of Phil Collins with Tarzan, but even that then it's more subtle than that because that's a bit more in your face and kind of it starts a sequence where this is now a musical sequence.
That's almost
with Toy Story. It's a lot more transitional.
The Phil Collins and Tarzan is sort of it's borderline narrating what's happening, whereas these songs. Who did these? Randy Newman, I think. I think it's Randy Newman. I don't know if did he do the score or just the soundtrack. I'm not sure. But anyway, like the actual songs themselves. The one later on that's pretty on the nose. Like that's like.
Of course,
you know what I mean?
But even so, it's unique to that moment. That's not the general kind of approach.
But there's something about this that it's like it's more. It just suits like the mood. You know what I mean? Like that's more what it is. It's about like the feeling of the character than the actual like this is what we're doing. And it's also notable that up until very recently, with Coco, which came out last year, Pixar has never had an outright like musical film. You know what I mean? So it's
when you rewatch the films, you do kind of think, oh yeah, this was one of my favorite parts of it. It's bringing back all these memories. Strange things hit me particularly hard at the start of this film because it's not something I ever really think about. I don't go, oh, I remember that soundtrack from this film, like I do with so many other works we talk about. But it's just when I heard it, it's like, oh, I remember this. I love this transition and the way it's kind of showing everything, time passing and tying the character emotions. It's all very well done.
I also like how, like with one of the themes here being like the theme of being replaced or not being the favorite anymore or being lost from home, or you know what I mean. It's surprisingly cerebral. A lot of this is made up in Woody's head. Like Andy never says Buzz is my new favorite toy. He just pays him a bit more attention early on and redesigns his room a bit. But he still very much likes Woody. You know, like in that. We get that because we get Andy's perspective. Woody doesn't understand that. You know what I mean?
He's got fear of being abandoned, as any toy would. It's the perfect core fear for a toy. Their entire reason for being is to be played with by kids, and if that suddenly isn't a thing anymore, which we'll get to explore more in the second film, that can have very lasting consequences for them. You understand the fear. And we get, the small scenes as well, like Bo trying to comfort Woody. Bo explains this to him, but it's not something that he's, consciously feeling. It's just he's just so paranoid about it, understandably so, because he's just saying, I've been put in the chest, I've been taken off my spot on the bed, he's not paying attention to me anymore, and it's even if it's temporary, he doesn't know that.
That's the thing about Woody is that I was surprised that I'd kind of either forgotten about or more likely never fully understood all the aspects of his personality when I was younger, because it's not that they ever make him truly unlikable, but he definitely does some underhanded things early on in this movie, to the point where it's like, you wouldn't call him like the villain or the antagonist, but he's not.
He's flawed, he's got these,
he's flawed,
and the story's driven by his flaws as well. It's not like it's not like it's just an added bit of flair. His mistakes are what drive the plot forward, as well as his his successes.
I would go as far as to say that early on, before he has like his arc, he is a selfish character. You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean he was bad, and it doesn't mean that he doesn't care about his fellow toys. He does. It's not all an act. Like, well, I'm in charge of this toy room, and I'm the mayor of Toyville or what. It's not all self-serving. It's not all self-aggrandizement. He does mean to help them when he runs the show there, but at the same time, he is selfish, and it is it's very clear, looking at it with sort of adult eyes, that Woody is kind of like his own worst enemy early on,
We
more so than Buzz is.
we spoke before about it, having come to this conclusion in the kind of the preamble for this, that he's basically the quintessential Slytherin character. We thought he is kind of thinking about the person who would fit most into that house. Looking at Hogwarts.
Yeah, more than that, he's the kind of Slytherin that never really showed up in the books that we kind of wish had.
Yeah, someone in the Order who could have been, part of it to explain, not all Slytherins are bad, even if they're flawed.
Yeah, they always say that. They always say that there's good out of all the houses, but really, come on. Slytherin didn't have a good representative, ever in the actual book. Slughorn was close, but he wasn't he was still, he was a teacher in old, I think, there should have been a student who was like this. You know what I mean? Or someone in the Order.
Young Order member, yeah. I completely agree. And Woody is a really good example of what that could have been as a character, because the story is driven by his flaws. He makes a lot of mistakes, and it's really interesting for a character perspective, and obviously for the engagement of the plot. But also his successes, when he does legitimately try to be a good person throughout as well. It's not like he's just completely selfish. It is his flaw, and the reason it's so prevalent in the film and throughout it consistently is because it's attached to his worst fear. His flaws will fall apart once he's then engaged his fears and beaten them. So it works so well as a narrative, and it attaches itself to the themes. It's a really powerful story, even aside from the toy stuff. This could be a human live action story, and it would be just as effective on the narrative beat level.
Yeah, I think that we'll wrap up on that point as well. That'll come back around, because that is really I think that's the reason why you don't grow out of this one. You can always still relate to it. But that's
because we don't play with our toys anymore in the same way. We might keep them and look after them, but we're not going to necessarily play with them. Looking at the third film, we'll get to that as well. But it's such a really the premise of the film alone is such a powerful and effective storytelling method, to say nothing of the merchandisability.
Right.
I mean, the Etch-a-Sketch just skyrocketed in sales on this side of the pond when it came out.
Yeah,
no one had played with them for years.
The idea of that is just genius. If I was a movie studio head, because we've talked about this with things like Star Wars, where we talk about the capitalist reason for wanting to make a movie, and how that can be it can be damaging. But at the same time, it's in The Incredibles 2 actually has a discourse about this. It's not a huge part of the narrative, but it comes up, and I know you haven't seen that yet, so I'm not going to go into specific detail.
Yeah,
but that idea
coming out in the UK for a month.
Worst that idea ever. The idea of the that the publisher and the developer they rely on one another. You know what I mean? And what's more important? And you can argue about the artistic merit of what the developer is doing, but if they can't get their product anywhere, well, what's really the point? And so it's you do need that side of it, the people that release it. In this case, I suppose Disney, right? Was this Disney? It was always Disney.
Yeah, it was just published by Disney. It wasn't part of Disney Studios at this point.
Disney just didn't own it yet. Okay. So I mean, there is. If I was the head of Disney and they told me, well, this is what we're thinking, I go, that's amazing. You have this great story that you want to tell, and it's built out of toys. I mean, it sells itself. I mean, that's great. In that, so you fulfill both the sort of money grubbing, financial.
There's nothing wrong with wanting and needing, or even needing to make a lot of money, but you have to have find a solution where the creative quality can drive the sales of the
thrive under it.
Yeah, precisely. Because you can have both, and when you have both, that's best for both parties. It's not like you have to sacrifice sales to make a story good. You make both benefit. Just focus on that.
When you have both, I think that's when you really get classics.
And it happens very consistently with both Disney Renaissance era stuff and the Pixar films. The best films, I mean, still talked about today.
Yeah, the funny thing about Disney Renaissance is a lot of those are crazy flawed, and it still doesn't matter. I mean, Hunchback of Notre Dame, which we'll get to one day. It's I love that movie. It's flawed as hell, but I mean, I love the movie. Yeah. But anyway, back to where are we in this?
Yeah, in the film, we're at the point where now Andy's going out to get pizza, and Woody wants to be taken with him. Basically, he wants to be the toy that's chosen to take.
And this sort of coincides with the introduction of Sid. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have a moment where he's introduced as in the next door, and he blows up a toy. And it's kind of late to introduce the antagonist of a film in terms of the average story structure. But because obviously the main theme and focus of the story is Woody's own flaws, it kind of works
Right.
because he's a secondary threat. He's not meant to be the villain of the piece. The villain is Woody
Yeah.
himself and his own problems.
In a way, yeah, and that's only if you're looking at Woody's side of the story. From Buzz's side, his big issue is coming to terms with what he is, and he's not even begun to do that at this point. So yeah, Sid is almost like a third stream, not even secondary. He's almost like just the obstacle itself, and not really like he doesn't have a reason. He doesn't acknowledge them as living beings, of course, because why would he? They're toys. So it's not really. I wouldn't so much call him a villain so much as he's just like the primary obstacle.
The chief obstacle, Which, given that, the fact that he's so present in the latter half of the film, the fact that he doesn't distort any of the the focus is credit to them for that alone. He's an obstacle that is purely obstacle. He's not like there's too much time spent on him or too little, or he doesn't. He's only comes in when they need to pause on the character work and have like a plot sequence and drive up the threat and the ticking clock, for example.
And again, that you have all these toys, and you have these two very different flavors of kid between Andy, who loves his toys, and Sid, who loves to torture his toys. And you have like these two different households that you get to see a fair amount of, and like all these things. This movie is only an hour and 17 minutes long, guys.
Yep.
It
does not feel that short when you're watching it.
Right.
It's
and that includes
paced.
credits time. You know what I mean? Like that's it's a very efficient movie. When it comes to Yeah, it's just so good. There's not a single scene to the point that you can't cut that, or there's nothing that needs to be added there. Like it's perfect. I love this movie. I love thinking about the genesis of these movies, like how much thought went into like every turn for this reason. If it feels like we're gushing, guys, it's because we are.
Yeah.
This movie is very like central to both of our childhoods, and it's just aged so well. It's great when things hold up.
You can squeeze every scene, every moment, and it's something. Gold will come out of it. That's how much attention to detail they spent throughout this. And we get the scene now where Woody, basically in an attempt to get Buzz out of the way, so he's chosen to go to the pizza place. He accidentally knocks Buzz out the window.
Yeah. And this is the one toy I do remember having from this. I had the RC car. I know my parents got me that.
I had a few of the others as well, mostly from stuff like McDonald's meals, but it was one of the few times when I actually bought into that kind of what's the name? Happy Meal toys. Toy Story was a rare example of when I went for that. And I had a few of those. But RC, definitely. A lot of people I knew had RCs. Probably because it's the most fun and playable without your imagination of all those toys. Not that you didn't have them as well. But so RC knocks him out, accidentally causes the lamp to knock him out the window. We have a kind of, oh God, he's been murdered. Woody's like, didn't mean for that, but never mind.
We also have the Wilhelm scream too, the famous sound effect which at the time, which was like, I think it was the first time that I acknowledged that outside of Star Wars, because it doesn't come from Star Wars, right?
No,
I mean, it's like a famous, it's been forever.
Some sort of old cowboy film, I think.
Yeah, I don't know where it originates, but like for sure, I know the first time I would have heard it would be like some stormtrooper falling, in a Star Wars movie. So it's like the little things like that to my child brain were like really fun, know. But that's the sound that Buzz makes when he is knocked out of the window.
And obviously we get the Woody is then selected and taken by by Andy, but we also get the confrontation of the toys as well. Them working out what happened, and RC explaining, and it's like it means Humpty Dumpty was pushed by Woody.
Right.
They play the humor into the serious moment of this, with Rex not backing him up and stuff. I don't like confrontations. This is a serious moment where they're basically turning on Woody fully for murdering their friend and going really too far in their eyes.
And they're not wrong. You know what I mean? Like it went much further than Woody meant for it to go, but it is still entirely his doing. You know what I mean?
Through his actions, through his flaws.
Yeah, I really like that.
But also he's not wrong to try and defend himself. Yes, he's done something wrong, and he acknowledges that because he does feel guilt for this. But at the same time, he's like, no, you don't understand. It was a mistake. So both sides we can back to a certain extent. It's not like he was not like he deliberately pushed him out the window, because that would have been too far.
Right. He just wanted him to be knocked behind like the shelf or whatever, so that Andy wouldn't see him, so that he'd be chosen to go to Pizza Planet.
It sounds so mundane, but it's built on this fear that he's built, and his frustration as well, specifically aimed at Buzz. It's not just like it's the fear without a present, figure for it. Buzz is right there in front of him, and he's going to be chosen. And he's still doing a stupid Space Ranger crap that is, and he picks up the ball and he shakes it. Will only pick me. He's being torn apart by this, and the fact that it's so funny to watch. This should not be funny, and it is because of the way they perfectly frame everything in each scene.
Yeah, like Woody, like we talked about the expressiveness of his face, just like the indignation that he goes through all this with. I mean, I love it. Like he can't believe like the situation he's in every scene, and it's just so. It's darkly humorous in a way, And
it never gets old because it does keep coming up and coming up and coming up, but it somehow manages to be fresh with each scene. Which kind of leads us into my favorite scene in the entire film, actually, with the when Woody gets taken by Andy and we get to the petrol station,
or gas station,
fuel station, whatever you want to call it, the place where you refuel your car. This actually struck when we looked back and before we'd even gone through the film. When we first discussed wanting to recover these films. It was the scene that came to mind immediately. There are certain scenes in films and in works that just call to mind. I don't know why this one was that for me. Obviously, upon further analysis, it's an extremely great, good scene. But something about it felt, cool to me even as a child before I understood the kind of nuance attached. It had a kind of threatened presence to it.
I think it's because this is like when the story really starts revolving directly around Buzz and Woody together in the predicament they're in. Like it's solidified, like, okay, this is what this movie's about now. Not that it was unfocused or anything, but like now these two that don't like each other, well, it's really more like a one-sided dislike at this point.
Apart from the mother thing,
Yeah, and it's like, and they're now in trouble, and they're forced to work together. And it's like Woody now really understands that like Buzz is not acting. It's that one moment where after like the hilarious fight with like the Buzz, like each other,
like the rescue. Great physical
comedy.
Like
after that part, like Buzz is like that moment where he's like, right now on the edge of the galaxy, Emperor Zurg is a Death Star, basically. It's like he's describing Darth Vader, more or less. It's like and like I have like the Death Star plans, and like you're impeding my investigation and all that, and it's that moment. It's like that
you are a toy.
It's like you are a sad, like what does he call him, a strange
little man,
But
well,
you have my opinion. So it's that moment. I think sort of is the movie. You know what I mean? Like that's the moment most people think of. I think, and it's very striking visuals as well. The
moon, the musical cue when he actually walks away. Because Buzz, this is ridiculous. We all know that. We're sharing Woody's perspective here, but at the same time, the honesty of the delivery and the way it frames the moon and how he's looking up at space right now, somewhere around the other side of the galaxy. It plays like an actual dramatic moment, as though you could almost believe him. Which is very, it adds so much credence to the immediate follow up with the humor and the dramatic realization from Woody and the whole "you are a toy." It just the entire scene builds on itself as it goes through the initial fight, the realization of Woody that he's actually thinking it's real, the fact that then Woody kind of gets on board and goes, okay, I can manipulate him with this, saying, look, I found a spaceship.
Yeah, in the form of the decoration on the Pizza Planet truck, which the Pizza Planet truck is like one of those hidden Pixar sort of Easter eggs that shows up in every film to some extent somewhere.
Along with the ball that was earlier on in the film.
Yeah, it was called like the Luxo ball or something like that.
I can't remember it.
And then they usually sprinkle in like their various characters that have appeared, in other movies somewhere. But yeah, the Pizza Planet truck is actually, I can't think about. I don't remember in Toy Story 3 at the moment, but in the first two Toy Stories, it's actually part of the plot.
They use it to get to where they need to go. But just before we get to that, when we move away from the scene, though, I think the big thing that we haven't talked about as well is the fact that Woody's realizing he's a lost toy here. His fear that this is the moment he's lost, and when the car drives off, and you feel this great big open space as opposed to the safe interior of a house. It's dark. You can almost feel the cold as well. So when they start to, not work together because obviously Woody's manipulating him, but when they kind of go, I found a spaceship. It's a spaceship, Buzz, and run over there. It's immediately followed up with the guitar, the rock music from the guy listening, who's driving it, listening to it. Yeah. Everything, again, it amps up and you switch from this kind of moment of loss and cold, fear and tension and everything building up there and drama to the humor and the action and the momentum that then immediately follows up with the what's the place called? Pizza Planet, yeah.
Pizza Planet, yeah.
And so there's a kind of mood to every sequence that I think is worth noting as well. It kind of you flow from dread and depression and tension to action and motion and all that jazz.
Yeah, and it's like I like how I like how well that they made just mundane things like stores, Pizza Planet, restaurant, a gas station, things like this that are very mundane and easy for us to navigate, like these wide, expansive, arenas for like these toys to have to work their ways through. Like they have to come up with creative ways just to get very basic things accomplished. It's just so. It's interesting and intriguing and well paced enough that you ignore the plot convenience. Like, would a Pizza Planet truck really be coming right now to take you to like your lost owner? Like, probably not.
Yeah.
But you don't care. Like, it's just, or at least I don't. Like, I mean, it's the kind of thing that if you want to enjoy the movie, if you're able to enjoy movies, you're not thinking about that. At this moment, you're just invested in what they're doing. And again, the comedy, like with Buzz having to be safe and secure and buckled, and Woody's thrown around in the back. It's I love it.
There are no safety harnesses in the cargo hold. Going up front, it's like it doesn't care about being caught. At least at this point. And just
he's not a toy, right? What's to get caught over?
Precisely. The small stuff like the toolbox as well, slamming into Woody. This is just a mundane thing, but it's a huge threat, and it has weight and impact. And it's like, oh god, you feel it.
I also like how it makes sense for him to be able to be battered like that because he's fabric. Like he's like a plush toy, whereas like other toys might be horribly broken by that. So like, not that, I mean, in a way, we kind of skipped over this, but he's always like on the losing end of every physical fight because he's a plush toy. But at the same time, he can take more damage because he's a plush toy.
When his head just spins round as Buzz punches it and leaps on, gets his fingers caught in the fight. It's the physical comedy on top of everything else, the intellectual and the intelligent stuff they do throughout the film. It works, and it's backed up by the premise of them being toys. It all comes together. But that they get in the drinks container and the burger box, and just like, which way are you going? It's all right. And just move into the Pizza Planet, and again, just talking about crazy environments that they have to navigate. That's a major one.
Yeah, I want to talk about this because it's like there's something as an adult. This is still true, but for when I was a kid, I didn't like places like Chuck E. Cheese. I just didn't care about like animatronic, like robotic, stupid mascots that would come out. I did like the arcades and things like that. Yeah. But like just the appeal of like the actual mascot, like the Chuck E. Cheese, I was like, I don't give a shit about that. Don't care. I kind of want to go to Pizza Planet. Yeah. like even as an adult, I kind of want to go there. It looks like a really fun place.
It's so cool. It's so grandiose. Everything's much larger scale than you'd expect in some sort of mundane, real life place, really. It's so cool. It reminded me, I know I mentioned before the recording, it reminded me of the place from Batman Beyond, the arcade.
What was
that very
place
similar
called?
sort of design. I can't remember.
Did that have a name?
I'm sure it did, but I can't remember it, to be honest. It was a long time ago. But yeah, that sort of...
it was called like some weird like... Is it called like Cheesy Dance or something like? I think it was called Cheesy Dance. I'm gonna have to look at that.
Something like that. Yeah, the commenters will let us know if nothing else, and we'll have to look back on it though. But yeah, just the environment. It's such a grandiose place, and the fact they have to navigate more places. Buzz is just saying, "Oh my god, it's a rocket!" It's launching shortly. He's just in heaven at this point. And we get the introduction to the jumping into the claw machine, of course,
which is like again. Woody just can't believe his rotten luck, because like they found a stupid spaceship, which is really just like a stupid, grab a toy machine that he now has to go get Buzz out of. And
he's tied to doing that because he can't go home without Buzz. It's clever in how they are tied physically together.
It's a Slytherin reason for doing it. Like if I can go home now, but if I do, I'll be hated. I'll be hated. It's like I have to bring him back and show that I didn't mean to. Otherwise, I won't be accepted. And then. They meet the cult of aliens,
just the aliens toys. It's such a small, insignificant part of the plot and story, but it's one of those kind of iconic quotation mark moments that just stands out.
And it's like when one of them's chosen, is like, I've been chosen. I go on to a better place, my friend. It's like,
my friends, I go on to a better place, and then he just grabs him to try and help him, and then they're both frozen again as Sid thinks he's got triple prizes. But
yeah, which is
because he gets the second time.
Yeah, I mean, and that's sort of the again, they do a really good job because we're now seeing how we don't need to know anything about Sid other than like what little we just saw like earlier to know this is bad.
Yeah,
you know, like this
exactly.
is not good.
And they do a good job of making the fear kind of climate a spike in the film. The film at this point. We've been reviewing too many books. When he's riding home with them in the bag. You know, it's a creepy bag for one. They're looking up through the zip and they're seeing this terrifying dog. And the tone again shifts from this action-packed kind of sequence to this almost horror in execution.
Yeah, now we're doing like kind of a horror movie.
Yeah.
And the other fun thing about it is like just not fun, but I mean the other thrilling aspect of it is how constantly close they are to going home. But because like Sid is their next door neighbor.
Yeah.
But they're in Sid's house.
Like, look,
I mean, it's like
you're almost sheriff. You're almost home. You know, it's your dwelling.
Yeah. Yeah, so close but so far. Yeah.
And it is so far because they've got this. It's a very small space from our perspective, but again, they're talking about the arenas they have to navigate. It's an entire yard with all of these threats and dangers that are being put in front of them, and it plays really well.
Yeah.
And the poor alien just gets ripped apart in the first scene. You know, it's a completely innocent moment from the dog's perspective, but you know they're just seeing their friend get ripped apart and brutalized. It's a really good introduction to that.
Well, he's sort of rubber, right? Like,
of course,
he's probably
not going to
okay.
be killed, but it's still brutal. I mean, it's just it's a good introduction to it from a red shirt character. And then we get Sid's room. Yeah,
Sid's room, which is like as a kid, this was very terrifying to me. You know, especially because like I really loved my toys when I was younger. You know, and like this place was just so creepy and unsettling, and like that.
Dun, 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 dun. Is that creepy? Just
yeah. Ooh. And just like the Woody's like you know, like that sort of moment where like he freezes, like his eyes go all twitchy or whatever, and he realizes what's going on, like or what he's looking at. It's very disturbing. You know, I mean, or at least as a kid, like it wasn't to the point where I ever shut it off. Or I was too afraid to watch. But it was like,
unsettling. It wasn't necessarily terrifying, but it was unsettlingly creepy, which is kind of a new thing as a kid. You know, you don't get exposed to that sort of just sequence in films or materials because they're not, you know, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to steer clear of that. Which Pixar again, it does a good job of addressing key elements for kids that they otherwise wouldn't get. I mean, Disney in general does that. I mean, Mufasa and Lion King, perfect example.
Yeah. It's funny how like little like children's media is like your first time experiencing like multiple things, and so like that's the reason why I think that what you do watch ends up shaping you. It's just do you have the good fortune of watching good stuff, or do you have the misfortune of watching less than good stuff? I think we were very lucky as children of like the 90s. You know,
the 90s kids in general with the media that was being released at that point in time were super lucky. Especially considering it continues on from young age to teenager. You know, the early 2000s was still kind of the 90s in terms of TV creations. So yeah, we're very lucky. I'm very proud.
Yeah.
I'm very pleased that I was born in the 90s.
Yeah, please. That's a better one. But yeah, so I mean, it's sort of like I can't remember like all the events because quite a lot happens in Sid's room actually. Like
it's one of those kind of sinkholes in the film time span that doesn't feel like one. You know, it does to the extent that a lot happens and you feel like you're spending a lot of time here, but at the same time, in terms of the grand runtime of the film, it's not that big a part of the film. And it's that efficiency again. You have the sequences with they arrive at Sid's house and, you know, panicking in the face of the cannibal toys that aren't actually cannibals, but they don't know that yet.
The next day, I guess he's sort of he's sort of like tortured because he like burns that hole in Woody's head, but then like he's interrupted because his mom tells him like his Pop-Tarts are ready. So like like that's the only thing that saves Woody from having like a hole burned through his
and he has that mark on for the most of the film as well, which is it stays. It's another part of the attention to detail thing. They could have just erased that. But Woody tries to escape, encounters Buster the dog, and he then hides in the cupboard, which leads us to the big reveal for Buzz.
Right, because Buzz is now
about to have an
around
existential crisis.
Yeah, he said, like, no, and that's the thing is like as a kid, you're with Buzz and like you understand that he's sad and all that, but like the idea that that's really what it is like it's an existential crisis. I mean. and he goes through it for like a good portion of the movie. Um, that's sort of like that's his arc, you know, just coming to terms with what he is.
Very short revelation and then resolution in terms of time span, but it's a very effective one. Again, going back to that efficiency, the amount they cover here in this very short space of time. Even step by step, you know, finding out the news on the TV, which is brilliantly delivered, because of course, you know, that's just the perfect, you know, revelation rather. You know, Buzz Lightyear, and just showing he's pressing a button that's being used on the screen. You know, it's coming to that realization. It's a powerful moment.
When you think about it, the whole series of Toy Story is like each movie is about accepting an uncomfortable truth, or you know what I mean, or a scary one. And in the next two films, it's much more about children forgetting you and growing out of you and moving on with their lives and, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
And to an extent, that's already in play with Woody's fear of being passed over, but it's not like Andy's still a little kid.
Yeah.
He's not
growing
got
out
of
time still at this point.
Yeah. He's just afraid of not being the favorite anymore, which is a much baser fear at the moment. Buzz's is the big one. That's the heady theme here, you know, is of coming to terms with what you are, or getting a dose of reality.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful moment. And again, even throughout all of this, throughout the massively powerful dramatic reveal of him having this existential crisis, it's still funny. You're still laughing all the way through. I've never seen a film capture that on both sides of the coin.
Aside from the actual montage with like the song where like he tries to fly out of the window, which is fairly heartbreaking, like that's not funny. Yeah. Like, but I mean everything else about it, especially like the follow up to that where he's Mrs. Nesbit.
Mrs. Nesbit.
Yeah.
Is it the hat? Can you at least go with that? It's brilliant.
Yeah. And,
why is he drunk? There's no reason for it, but it's funny. It works.
He's just completely lost it. Like he's even supposed to be drinking tea. Whatever. Yeah, like there's no reason for drunk. And I can't remember exactly when this happened. I guess this is the next. Yeah, it's now because his arm fell out, right? And that's like Woody now has like a way of getting home because he's able to toss the line.
Before we jump onto that though, just we mentioned before when we were just talking before we started recording, the arm itself. You know, when he's got one of the most powerful moments in the sequence for me is when he's like this tiny. Well, that's later, actually.
That moment where like he's holding like the arm and like the other hand, like there's something about that like triggers like an OCD reaction in my head.
Yeah,
you know, like
mentioning it.
You know, because he's holding. It's correct. It's totally right. Like that, his hand would be facing that way because it's his hand, but he's doing it with this one, and like that to this day that bothers me. You know, just something about looking at it. But it's right. It's totally right.
Perfectly right. And even the articulation where it clicks and moves and kind of hangs there, it's a good example of how that they're perfectly capturing that these are toys, even during the part where he's the most human he will ever be in the film. With the exception of one moment later on, that is probably my favourite as well. It's so powerfully done, and you know, it's the gesticulation. It's just that simple motion is all it takes. Can't even fly out the window.
Yeah, he's at this stage now where like he now realizes what he is, but he doesn't realize what a purpose he serves yet. You know, so he's completely just reeling right now.
Yeah, he's not hit the rock bottom moment yet, which will get followed up in the next sequence. But yeah, we get to the whole, you know, hey, Buzz is here. It's like, it's with me, guys.
Yeah, and this moment to me was always just it was so frustrating as a kid because again, like Woody's so close, you know, but
Buzz, just go up there, and it's like, what's the point? And you get why, but it's like as a kid, it's just come on.
Yeah, it was frustrating to me. It's like why won't he get up and show that he's there and they can go home right now and blah blah blah. But I mean, it as an adult, like that's the way it should be, you know, like that's what makes sense. That's what I mean. Like you grow into a movie about toys that you grow into. Yeah. It's just so crazy that's the way it is.
Brilliant. And again,
this is also
even with the frustration and the torment and that he's that close, it's still again doing the humor. It's like, can you give me a hand?
Right. Yeah.
Very funny, but like, this is serious.
And the fallout from this is that as much as most of the toys were against Woody, like for the majority of this portion of the movie, since basically from the moment that Buzz was thrown out the window. he always
Slinky.
had like a couple of supporters, and this is like the moment where like he has like none because like Slinky Dog's done with him because it does seem and that's a hard moment to watch because Slinky's so sweet,
Yeah, he's so
and
likable.
funny.
He's not really that relevant
Yeah.
compared to some of the other characters. Even
He's not relevant at all.
He's
but
more of a tool than the rest of them because of his lastability.
He's but he's got a lot of heart to him. Yeah, and I can't remember the name of this. You remember you told me like you thought the guy who played Ham was dead. It's not. It's the guy who played Slinky passed away. They had to they replaced him.
But yeah,
no, it's Slinky. Maybe both by now. I don't know. But I mean, I don't think so. Because I think the guy who does Ham is in all the Pixar movies. There's a guy named like John Ratzenberger or something. He has like a German name, something like that. But in any case, I think that the vocal performance of Slinky is like kind of what sold that because like early on he has like that funny moment with the checkers. It's like I'm gonna be red this time. Like no, Slinky. Okay, right. you be red. Yeah, it's
so
like no,
that's so
that's not what I'm talking about. Yeah, but this is like the moment where even he's done with Woody. So it's really like they have nothing going for them at this point.
Yeah, so this is the moment where Buzz gets fixed by the cannibals, and then as they're rejoicing about this, and he just kind of goes, "Oh, what does it matter?" And Woody then takes cover as Sid comes in with the rocket, to strap him to it.
And again, this is another thing. Earlier in the film, Sid was being a jerk to his sister, like, Hannah, is my package here? And she's like, I don't know. So, what do you mean you don't know? He's like, I don't know. Like, so it's already been hinted that he's expecting something, So I just like how they drop all those breadcrumbs, before they get to every little reveal.
And they don't really need to. It's not like the story would have lost anything if it wasn't mentioned that this came in. But it just makes it feel like they put so much more attention to it because they did. It draws the eye after the fact.
It doesn't. It's because otherwise, like, it's not even like it's not a flaw that a kid like him has like a giant firework around, or a rocket. Like, I mean, fine, whatever. You don't need to explain that. But it's nice that they do. Like, like they that he's looking forward to doing something. And an asshole like him, it must be bad, And then, like when we finally get like the payoff, it is. It's like he just wants to blow something up. And of course, he chooses his rocket man for that, or his spaceman to send into space.
And we get the literal ticking clock again because he sets the alarm as the rain comes and it's next year. It's the literal ticking clock for the next scene.
I was going to say
revelation.
I wanted to mention the rain because the rain on that window looks really good again for like the time. That's a good, just a really good effect. I like that.
The big ones for me in this film were the rain, like I said, there on the windowsill in that scene. The reflections of Buzz's visor, and the reflections again on the hardwood floor in the in the house, on Annie's house specifically. The reflections in general, they really well this early on.
Yeah,
it's not an easy thing to get right.
No, like and by like modern standards, like what they're doing in things like Coco and Incredibles 2 are just ridiculous in that regard. But I mean, it's so good. But yeah, I mean, because like Andy walks in his room and you could see like his reflection in the hardwood floor. It's nuts. Like to think that they put that kind of detail into this.
But this is the moment when Sid's weirdly sleeping like a toddler. I don't know why, but whatever. We get
I have seen kids sleep like that. How old is he supposed to be?
Is he supposed to be a teenager? I got the impression.
I don't think he's teenage.
Preteen, late, maybe 10
I mean,
or whatever.
Yeah, maybe 10. So I guess like older than Andy, but not,
older than Andy, but not massively old. But either way, too old to be sleeping like that.
I don't know. Like I've seen like my cousins sleep strangely, and they were like.
Enough. I've only ever seen toddlers do it, but regardless, he's sleeping. And this is one of the most powerful scenes in the film, again, because this is the moment where Buzz has really hit rock bottom, and it's just, why does any of this matter? I'm just a toy, a stupid, insignificant toy, and he's indicating, his little gauge thing on his arm as he does this, with the made in Taiwan or China, I can't remember. Made in wherever on
Taiwan.
The back.
That sounds right. Taiwan. I think it was not China. Yeah, it was Taiwan.
And it's just he's just the movement of the arm again, the creaking of the articulation. Everything is so perfectly toy, which is important here. Beforehand it wasn't as relevant to the moment. It was just a reinforcement to the comedy. But here it's important because his whole existential crisis is wrapped around the fact that he's just this insignificant toy. And Woody's response, in saying that you are his toy. You're
a cool toy. Yeah,
you're so
and
cool. You've got all these things.
And you're cooler than me. And he is a cool toy. Like he glows in the dark. Yeah, he glows in the dark. He's got like a laser. There's a whoosh thing. He's got wings, and all that. Like he is a cool toy.
Yeah.
I had a Buzz Lightyear too. I can't believe I didn't mention that. But I know I had an RC car, but I had a Buzz Lightyear as well.
I think I had Buzz Lightyear and Woody as well, but I never really played with them that much. It was only I was into Lego as a kid more than anything else. But yeah,
you mean Legos?
Lego. It is a Lego.
I know. I just like pushing buttons.
I know. But yeah. So it's just a really powerful moment because it's not like they're getting this great big revelation of what they are more than Woody's not saying he's anything more than he's claiming to be, but he's saying why it matters. He's saying why it doesn't suck to be a toy.
He's finally expressing what's been going on inside his head to someone else, which he hasn't really. He's finally accepted even that he's not cool or as cool. Like he's now the one in need of a pick me up, which is why Buzz does what he does or tries to do what he does.
And the resolutions of both of their arcs coming together and being solved, alongside one another, as well as wrapping that into the resolution of their personal struggle. This is when they bond again and properly.
Mm-hmm.
It's so nice. It's the perfect climax of the emotional struggle before we move into the kind of actual film's third act climax of the action and the plot resolution. It's so well done. Because of the ticking clock that's been pre-established, when they do come to this revelation and Woody's given up and then Buzz is finally snapped out of his funk as he's trying to break him out and help him, it's too late because now it's the morning.
Right.
So it's all just it's one of those scenes that is just so perfectly done. Amongst a set of so many great ones in this film.
Yeah, and it's from here on out, every scene is like that for me. Pretty much the whole movie is, but each scene leads so naturally into the next, and just what happens is so fun and dynamic and interesting and engaging. Because now we're pretty much at the point where, Sid is woken up and he's, going to do what he, wanted to do before.
Yeah.
And he's set up.
And gets set up to blow him up.
And this is when Woody sort of rallies the other toys, to get behind him to help,
back in the leadership position, different set of toys, but he's back in that, the groove that we saw him at the start of the film, ready to kind of take the mantle up. And it's a really engaging. Again, we keep talking about the navigating the arenas, but what they play with here is so fun. Almost like a heist movie in a mini montage style,
which is pretty much the entirety of what the third one becomes. But yeah, the seeds for that are planted here already. And I don't know how much we want to talk about this, but just the I do want to say that the one thing that was just terrifying to me as a kid was the moment where there's the reveal of the fact that the toys are alive to Sid, and the dead soldier with the nail through its head that came. That was gross to me as a kid. That was zombie movie stuff. That was creepy. That imagery just shot me right back to being a kid when I saw it again.
Even what Woody's doing, he's literally traumatizing Sid at this point. But he's like,
and the thing is
nice. He's like, but you do not blame him for freaking out at that point.
No, you don't. But it's a comeuppance here that he deserves, because he's
definitely a satisfying comeuppance. But at the same time,
he's the kind of kid that, even though I already said he's not really the villain and isn't necessarily evil, if that kid decided became a serial killer, later on you go, yeah, okay, I could see that. You know what I mean? He's pointlessly cruel.
Yeah, and what we see from him in Toy Story 3, we can hope at least that he turned a corner after this. He's looking. There's a theory about him wanting to save toys from the rubbish that he's collecting and stuff that I'm a big fan of, because it just the idea that he's now he knows, unlike everyone else, that they are alive, or at least he thinks they are, because he maybe just put it off as paranoia.
Wait a minute, I've only seen Toy Story 3 one time. Is Sid's in Toy Story 3?
He's the I think he's the rubbish disposal person.
Oh, crazy! I didn't realize that. Okay, all right.
I might be imagining that. I'm pretty sure that's true. But yeah, there's a theory about it. I think online.
I'll revisit that because I wasn't aware of that.
We'll get to the film at any rate. Yeah. So we'll see when we get to it. But yeah. So I hope that he had this was a turning point for him, and he learned and got over his little issues.
I was speaking
to an extent. He's not really doing anything wrong. He's damaging toys, but he's being creative. It's one of those cases where he's just slightly skew-off.
No, I think he's being an asshole. He's quite the little asshole. He's breaking stuff. He's taking too much enjoyment in what he's doing.
The perceived suffering of what he's doing. Yeah.
He's in need of medication and counseling. Okay, before this drove him insane. The toys coming, being possessed or whatever, and play nicely, Sid. Before that. You already need the counseling. That's all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, for sure. But
he's not evil, but he's a shithead. He's a little shit. Okay, he's the neighborhood shit. They even say he got booted. The reason he's home and not at summer camp is because they booted him home early this
Yeah,
year because
that's
sick
true.
of his
That's
shit.
true. Yeah.
He is that shithead kid. But
But
yeah.
yeah, and he's
Anyway,
traumatized, so we're always watching you. So play nice. We get that moment.
always watching it.
Yeah,
That reminds me more of
revolving
Ross.
of the head.
I'm watching you, Wazowski.
Always watching.
It's like
It's
he's
great.
walking with, like he needs he gives the impression that he wants a shower after hearing her say that. It's just I love, but that's a different movie. We'll get to Monsters Inc.
Yes,
soon.
yeah, that's on the docket.
Um,
But yeah, so we have the
but
escape. We have the plan succeeding. They
now,
grab Buzz and
I don't feel the need to talk about this sequence too much in specifics. I will just say that it's one of my favorite climaxes to like a kids movie ever.
Oh yeah, it's for me. It's the escalating obstacles and tensions. They get so close and yet so far so many times, and every obstacle is overcome. And they have RC, and then they have the rocket, and then the rocket needs to be lit, and it can't be lit because the match goes out. It's just everything is against them, and it's just a perfect example of them having that escalating tension work so fluidly, as well as to do with the characters because they're working together again. Buzz is giving up, and it's like
it's the reconciliation of the other toys too, because when it first starts out, they're actively trying to impede Woody because all they see is Woody. You know what I mean? They don't realize that Buzz is alive and that what Woody's doing is trying to get Buzz back. He's trying
as he throws RC out.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just and the whole thing, culminates with that. We're flying. Like that image is just so iconic.
And the music,
and it's like this is flying. This is falling with style.
It's such a perfect bookend to their whole joint arcs and how they've become friends at this point.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Like with a cherry on top. I mean, it's I love it.
Yeah, and talking about a bookend, the final end of the film is that then they're going straight back to the beginning where now it's Christmas and they've got the same situation where they're terrified of being. Well, they're not terrified because they've got over that now, but they're still trying to work out what's coming regardless.
And you can also see that the room is decorated Woody and Buzz style, which is like they're both the favorites. It's like it's not like It's like what I said. Like it is very much a cerebral fear that Woody had. Like Andy had just a new toy that he was hyped about, but he still loves Woody.
Yeah, it's it endears us to Andy if nothing else, but also it perfectly resolves the conflict that never really was. It was all internal, and it's such a perfect wrap up for the whole theme of the film. And it's like, it ends with what could possibly be worse than you, and then a puppy is like, okay, well that's another little layer of relatability because everyone's or a lot of people I suppose have had that whole pet v toy experience, and it's just another little bit that comes in and another little play on the new fun toy kind of thing.
Right. So now we're going to sort of wrap up, guys. We've been talking for a while, but we have a few more talking points to get to. We'll talk about just like the general themes of the film, I see like you have like a little note here. You wrote that. Do you want to take that one, Callum?
Yeah, just we touched on it a bit in the actual Fanalysis proper, but the fact that the toys are and suffering, if for lack of a better word, feeling human emotions. These guys are feeling our emotions. We are able to relate with pieces of plastic because of the way they are giving these experiences to them. The emotions that are coming across their face, the animation that the power of the animation that brings that across for us, the lessons they're learning and stumbling through, and the fact that they're learning them alongside one another and bonding over it. It's all wrapped up in this kind of perfect, relatable message of the film. That it's not feeling like a message. It's not preaching to you or giving you this moral, like look after your toys or anything. That's not the point.
No,
but it's all coming across still. You're getting it just watching this film, and there's no lesson to be learned. You're just understanding what it's trying to sort of not necessarily, but is tell you. It's interesting like that. It is a film for kids where like the characters learn a lesson, but it's like the characters' lesson to learn, not really the kids' lesson to learn. Which in a film about toys, where you should look after your toys, is part of the many messages. It could have easily been about how don't damage your toys, kids. Look after your stuff, and it's not. It's nothing to do with that.
It's just a fun adventure, and is what it is, and I think like we've already talked about like the humor and things like that. So I think like this is like a good area to sort of wrap it up with like what the movie's really about. Pixar in the days since then, even including this film's direct sequels, Toy Story 2, they've become known as like that studio that makes movies that are heartbreaking in some sense, you know, or have like that very emotional core to them, or make you cry, things like that, right?
Make you feel, basically.
Yeah, but I mean, like a lot of people like cry at Pixar.
Oh
Like
yeah,
it's
of
just
course,
it's
yeah.
because
But
like that specific emotion, that specific. I mean, when you talk about like things like the opening of Up, the
talk about
just
the top heavy
the
film.
yeah, the premise of Finding Nemo, and in other films that we'll mention later, they've become like that studio. This movie doesn't do that. Like it really just doesn't. But it's not like it doesn't feel like a failure for that reason. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that it isn't like it stands out like for that reason, that it's not one of those sort of definitive Pixar movies in the sense that it'll make you cry, but it is at the same time the definitive Pixar movie. You know, like it sort of defined the studio without actually doing any like the
for every level.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just sort of it's strange that I guess what it is that you do think of that crying or that intense emotionality with Toy Story, but you think of that for the later films, at least subconsciously, because that comes in droves in Toy Story 3, but also in a place in Toy Story 2. But the director of the third Toy Story film, whose name's Lee Unkrich, who also directed Coco and co-directed Monsters Inc. and Finding Nemo, and if you look at all those movies, those are all very like emotional movies, right? He said because he won an Oscar for Toy Story 3. He won one for Coco too, by the way. But I mean, he won the best animated feature Oscar for Toy Story 3. And he said in his acceptance speech that he was glad that a movie that the public was able to embrace a movie that was about talking toys who hopefully had very human things to say. And even though he said that about the third movie, I think that you easily apply that just the same or even more to the first one. You know,
all three, in fact. But yeah, just the fact that they're trying. You know, that's all he was essentially trying to do. It's a very pure story that would stand up on the level that it has done with that alone. But it had so much more to it. You know, the efficiency of the plotting and the pacing, the humor, the layers on the humor, because it's not just a one note type kind of style.
No.
The character interactions, the quality of the animation, everything just builds up to make this effectively a masterpiece of a film. I would say if any film was 10 out of 10, it's this kind of product.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, nothing is ever truly perfect, really, but I don't subscribe to the idea that I just don't give perfect grades because nothing's perfect. I think that you do give a perfect grade, if something is as close to perfect as it can be.
The highest tier you can reach, before it transcends and just becomes like an art piece. And I think Toy Story does reach that for me. Most
for me
Pixar
as well.
does, but especially this example of one.
Yeah, I would say roughly half of Pixar does that for me. Because, 20 films is a lot, actually.
Oh, yeah.
That's quite a lot of films. And as we'll get to, not all of those are excellent. But,
Cars.
Someone's saying good dinosaur. Anyway, but setting those ones aside, which we will get to, we will address those in time, guys. I think what it was they were that studio that for a while, like everything they made was a hit, that.
It was the Renaissance
they
period.
didn't have a failure.
Everything Disney was a hit. They were just on fire at this point, and the fact that they managed to do something new in the middle of that kind of stood apart from the rest as this new branch of quality storytelling. It's impressive, and it's a key part of so many of our childhoods, and more importantly, childhoods to come. It's not like this is not like this is a piece from the era that will never be touched again. It's still being watched and enjoyed by kids today.
Totally agreed. And it is like just the aesthetic, the quality. Like these days, yes, there's Disney Animation Studio. Like when you look at things like Moana or Zootopia, like modern CG, Disney movies, they are as good looking for the most part as most Pixar movies. DreamWorks with like How to Train Your Dragon and things like that. Like they've stepped up their game. But it's like, I think Pixar was like that rallying point where like they were like, here's the bar, like everyone get on this level. And even though it could be argued that most of those animation studios are now like on that level, how many years did it take? And they were doing this in 95. You know what I mean?
Day one, they reached this peak. So it's truly impressive. And I'm looking forward to diving into the rest of the material that they released and the different orders we're going to. So,
that kind of
guys,
wraps
up this one.
that's been Toy Story, and we'll return with more for you guys. We have like 9 more of these individual reviews coming up, and we'll see you. Well, actually, we have 7 more because you've already seen it. Long story. Anyway, thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll catch you on the next one. See you later. Yeah. Bye.
I still don't have an outro.
I wasn't even gonna like address that. Take care, guys. Bye bye.